46-year-old Susanna Reed told the 28-year-old horse trainer he was too young for her. She did not know he had not come for the horses. He had come for her. Susanna had 47 days left before the bank took the ranch her grandfather carved out of the New Mexico foothills in 1873. What follows is how a stubborn ex-rodeo queen and a drifter with a borrowed name nearly destroyed each other, saving what they loved, and the one whispered word that nearly cost them everything. Welcome to the channel. Settle in and let us ride back to the spring of 1889 and the 73,000 acres of wind-bitten grass in the foothills outside Encino, New Mexico, where Susanna Reed was running out of time and out of options. 6 months earlier, Susanna had buried her husband in the family plot on the North Ridge and come home to a stack of letters she could not bring herself to open. The bank had been patient for almost a year. It would not be patient for much longer. The note against the ranch was $41,000. The last good year for cattle had been 1883. Now there were 112 head of Hereford left, and not enough pasture for the summer. The windmill in the East Draw had thrown a bearing in February, and the well had run dry since. Susanna had ridden the circuit in her 20s. She had been the 1875 Pecos Valley champion, the 1876 Tucumcari champion, the 1877 Santa Fe champion, and the only woman to ever win the open bronc riding at the Lincoln County Fair. That was 20 years ago. She was 46 now, and the only thing she had left from those years was a name and a record and a body that still walked a little crooked from the wreck at Dodge City in 1878. Her left hip clicked when it rained. She had not been on a bronc in 19 years. What she had was a ranch her grandfather had carved out of nothing in 1873, a debt her husband had run up buying mares he could not afford and equipment he did not need, and a clock she could hear ticking every time she sat alone in the kitchen after dark. She needed a horse trainer who could break and school the 4 unbroken yearlings in the south pasture before the roundup in late June. She had taken out an ad in the Santa Fe paper in March. 63 people had answered. She had hired none of them. They were too young or too soft or too willing to ask questions about the debt. One had been a drunk who smelled of whiskey at 9 in the morning. One had been a man who took one look at the South Range and told her the whole operation was 2 months from ruin. Then, on a Tuesday in late April, a man on a bay gelding with a Texas brand turned off the county road and rode up to the front porch without knocking. He was tall and quiet, and his left hand was scarred from the wrist to the knuckle, from an old rope burn. He wore a dark wool coat mended at the elbow, and a wide-brim hat that had lost most of its shape. He swung down off the gelding and stood there for a long moment before he spoke. He said his name was Micah Calder. He said he had seen the ad. He said he had been working horses for 16 years. He said he would take room and board and no wage until the first horse sold. He did not say where he had been before. He did not say what had scarred his hand. He did not say why a man with 16 years on a string was willing to work for nothing. Susanna looked at him for a long time. He was 28, maybe 29. He was not soft. His boots were worn through at the sole. His shoulders were still straight. He was not the kind of man who asked questions. She said, "You can sleep in the bunkhouse and eat with the hands. We start at 5. He nodded, took his saddlebag off the gelding, and walked to the corral without another word. That night, Susanna sat at the kitchen table with a coffee she had stopped drinking an hour earlier. She did not let herself think she had hired a stranger whose name she could not be sure of. She did not let herself think about the $41,000. She did not let herself think about the banker's letter in the bottom drawer. The one that had said 90 days and meant it. She let herself think about the 4 yearlings in the south pasture, and about whether a man with a scarred hand and 16 years on a string could make them worth something by June. Outside, the coyotes started up on the south ridge. The windmill turned uselessly in the dry wind, and the kitchen clock on the wall kept counting the seconds she had left. 2 weeks passed before Susanna let herself admit that Micah Calder knew what he was doing. The first yearling had been a black gelding with a mean eye and a habit of striking. Micah had spent 4 days doing nothing but sitting in the corral with him, reading the horse the way a man reads weather off the sky. On the 5th day, the gelding let him touch its neck. On the 7th, he had a saddle on. By the end of the 2nd week, the horse would follow him across the pasture without a lead rope. Susanna watched most of it from the porch. She told herself she was keeping an eye on the operation, not the man. There was something about the way he moved around a horse that reminded her of the old hands from the circuit. Patient, quiet, not asking the animal for more than it could give. One morning in mid-May, she brought him coffee without being asked. She set the tin cup on the fence post and walked back to the house. He did not call after her. He did not thank her. He drank the coffee and kept working. That was the way it was between them for the first 3 weeks. They spoke about the horses. They spoke about the fences. They did not speak about anything else. Now let me ask you something, and I want you to think about it before we go on. If a man shows up on your land with no past and no questions, do you trust him, or do you wait for the reason he came to show itself? Tell me in the comments what you would do. The reason came sooner than Susanna expected. On the 28th of May, a buggy pulled up the county road with 2 men inside. One was Quentin Gage, the cattleman from up the Guadalupes. He was heavy, well-fed, well-dressed, with a hat that cost more than any horse on the ranch. The other was the sheriff from Encino, a lean old man named Coburn, with a white mustache and a quiet way of looking at you that made you want to tell the truth, even when you had not done anything wrong. Gage climbed down from the buggy and smiled. It was the kind of smile that did not reach past his teeth. He said he had heard Susanna was having a hard year. He said he had come to make her a fair offer for the ranch. $41,000, the exact amount of the note, paid in cash by sundown Friday, in exchange for a clear title and her signature. Susanna looked at him for a long time. She did not trust the offer, and she did not trust the man. She asked why he wanted the land so badly. Gage said cattle. Susanna said the South Range would not carry more than 200 head. Gage smiled again. He said, "Ma'am, I am not buying your grass. I am buying your water." He left. Coburn stayed behind. He watched Gage's buggy disappear down the county road. Then he looked at Susanna and said there was another matter. He said a man had been seen riding into Encino 2 weeks earlier, who matched a description the territorial marshal had sent out from Santa Fe. He said the man was wanted in connection with a Lincoln County shooting, but the warrant had never been sworn. He said the man was tall and quiet, and his left hand was scarred from the wrist to the knuckle. Coburn asked Susanna if she knew anyone like that. Susanna said no. She lied for a man whose real name she did not know, because the alternative was that he would be taken from her ranch, and her 4 yearlings would not be ready by June, and the bank would have the place by July. That night, Susanna did not sleep. She sat at the kitchen table and listened to the wind and asked herself what she had done. Outside in the bunkhouse, Micah Calder, or whatever his real name was, slept like a man with nothing on his conscience. The 4 yearlings moved in the dark pasture. The kitchen clock kept counting, and Susanna began, slowly, to understand that she had stopped thinking about whether to save the ranch. She had started thinking about whether to save the man. By the middle of June, the 4 yearlings were worth more than Susanna had dared to hope. Micah had broken them in 7 weeks, 3 weeks ahead of what she had been told was possible in that country. The black gelding would carry a saddle and a man without complaint. The bay filly would neck rein and stop on a whisper. The 2 sorrels would follow a lead rope from one end of the property to the other without ever lifting their heads. Micah had sold 2 of the 4 to a buyer from Fort Sumner, paid himself nothing, and handed the receipts to Susanna on a Friday afternoon with no comment. She had 17 days left. The note against the ranch was still $41,000. The 2 receipts in her hand came to $210. She sat at the kitchen table and looked at the numbers and understood that no amount of broken horses was going to be enough. That same afternoon, Quentin Gage drove up the county road for the 3rd time. He did not bother with a smile this time. He set his hat on the porch rail and said that his offer had expired. He said there was a man in Encino who was willing to take the note off the banker's hands for $38,000, and that man worked for him. He said Susanna had until Friday. He said if she did not sign, the bank would call the note early with no grace period. He said the matter was settled. He said good day. Susanna watched his buggy disappear down the county road. She did not move for a long time. Then she walked down to the corral where Micah was working the last of the sorrels and stood on the other side of the fence and watched him for 10 minutes before he looked up. He looked up. He read her face. He put the sorrel back on the lead rope and walked to the fence. He did not ask what was wrong. He did not ask what Gage had said. He looked at her for a long time, and then he said, very quietly, "Susanna, why did you tell the sheriff you did not know me?" She felt the wind stop. She felt the kitchen clock on the wall back in the house click over a second. She said, "Because if I had, they would have taken you back to Lincoln County." He was quiet for a long moment. He said, "There was no shooting. I was the witness. The man who did it told people I was the shooter, and I ran because I knew how the territory worked. I have been running for 3 years. I stopped running the day I rode up to your porch." She looked at him. He looked back. The wind came up again off the foothills and moved a strand of gray hair across her face, and she did not lift her hand to push it back. She said, "You are too young for an old cowgirl like me." He said, "To me, ma'am, you are perfect." She did not sign Gage's paper. On Saturday morning, she rode into Encino and sat down with the banker and told him she would not sell to Quentin Gage. and that if he called the note early, she would fight him in territorial court, and that the man who had broken the yearlings was the best horse hand in the territory, and she would pay the note off in 2 years with his help, or she would lose the place in 2 years without it. The banker looked at her for a long time. Then he said, "Ma'am, you have until the first frost." She had bought herself another season. The kitchen clock on the wall kept counting, but slower now, and with more room in the seconds. That is where our story leaves Susanna Reed and the stranger whose real name she still did not know. The ranch survived. The 4 yearlings were sold. The debt was paid down, slowly, the way debt gets paid down in country like that, 1 horse at a time. And the man who had come for the horses stayed on, and learned in his own quiet way that the woman who had lied for him was the woman he had been riding toward since the day he turned off the county road in April. Thank you for riding with us through the foothills of New Mexico. Drop a comment with the moment that hit hardest, like the video so others can find it. Hit the bell so you do not miss the next ride, and subscribe if you want more of these old country stories. We will see you on the next trail.